Hello, it's me, Recky, together with
Carol.
Welcome back for another reaction.
Yes.
In the world we live today, a good military or armed forces is needed. So we're going to check out a video today. I just clicked where I'm not supposed to click. And this is just how massive is the U.S. military.
Okay.
And this is from the channel called The Military Show.
2 months ago.
2 months ago. And it almost has already 1 million views in this one. So this must be a state, a new video.
Yeah, okay.
A current
up to date.
Video, a current video. If you do enjoy the content, don't forget to show us by hitting the like and, of course, that subscribe. And if you want to check out the video without Recky and Carol, you find the link for the channel. And, of course, for the video we're going to watch will be located right down there in the description. Go there and give him the support that they so much deserve. And I think we should just watch the video. Yeah. Let's do this. Shaboom, boom, and boom.
Just how massive is the US military, especially when compared to other world powers? Let's start with some basic figures to give you a sense of the sheer scale at which the US military operates. Altogether, the US military has roughly 1.3 million active personnel, putting it in either third or fourth place in terms of the largest militaries. The first two spots, China and India, should be a given, considering that they have roughly triple the population of the US. Russia has roughly the same number of active military personnel, but its military numbers have significantly changed from one year to the next, especially as global geopolitics saw Russia distance itself from NATO. When comparing the size of the US military with that of China and India, a clear pattern emerges. China, a country with a population of roughly 1.41 billion, with a B, has roughly 2.03 million active personnel in its military. India, with a slightly higher population, estimated at 1.42 billion, has 1.45 million active personnel. And then there's the US, with a population of just 336 million. Even at a glance, the population metrics suggest that the US is much more militarized compared to China and India, considering that its ratio of active personnel to population is almost triple the size. Of course, these are all figures from 2024, although the numbers, or rather the relative differences between them, haven't changed much over the past decade. But perhaps the mind-blowing scale of the US military is more evident in the fact that the US military is by far the biggest spender among the world's veritable superpowers. In fact, if you look at the biggest military budgets, the US military accounts for 40% of the entire world's military budget for national armies. That's 2/5 of the money the world spends on national defense, all wrapped up in the US military. The country spends more than the next 5 biggest spenders, China, Russia, India, the UK, and Saudi Arabia combined. And the list is only that short because China and Russia are estimated to spend more on their armies than the official numbers imply, thanks to the relative purchasing power parity of their local currencies. According to the SIPRI military expenditure database, the US spends more than the next 10 countries combined, not 5, if we compare their relative expenditures in raw US dollars. This financial mismatch is down to the US being a bona fide economic giant compared to all other countries. Impressive as the US's 2024 military budget of roughly $900 billion may be, it pales in comparison to the country's GDP. By some estimates, the US spends only 3.4% of its GDP on national defense, ranking it 9th in its expenditure on national defense globally. But the numbers from the 2020s don't come close to the figures from previous decades. During the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq in 2010, that ratio was closer to 5%. In the thick of the Vietnam War in 1968, the US was spending close to 10% of its GDP on the army. And even further back, during the Korean War in the 50s, the figure rose as high as 14%. These figures showcase just how dedicated the US government was to maintaining its military. But perhaps more importantly, they demonstrate how the US economy grew in tandem with the country's global geopolitical presence. When adjusted for inflation, the US is spending much more than at any point in history after World War II, but proportionally less as a percentage of the national income. So where is all the money being spent, and where are all those 1.3 million personnel deployed? The US military, officially the US Armed Forces, is composed of 6 separate branches: the Air Force, the Army, the Navy, the Marine Corps, the Coast Guard, and the Space Force. We'll let you guess which one of those is the newest. Let's take a look at them, starting with the US Army. As the land-based branch of the armed forces, the US Army has arguably the largest contingent of US troops. Out of the 1.3 million active troops, the Army holds roughly 450,000. But there's a bit more to it. The US Army also technically counts the Army National Guard in its ranks, which adds another 330,000 military personnel as Federal Reserve forces during wartime. but typically only as a militia service. Additionally, the US Army Reserve has roughly 188,000 more troops. The US Army's primary directive is to ensure complete land dominance over the enemy in all the US military's major operations. As such, it's one of the nation's primary offensive and defensive forces, and among the first branches to be deployed into military conflicts anywhere in the world. This worldwide coverage is made possible by the US Army's enormous and extensive range of military equipment. For example, it has 4,600 M1 Abrams tanks, some of the most modern pieces of armor available worldwide. This main battle tank has been pivotal ever since it first entered active duty during the Gulf War in 1991. Since then, the Abrams has received extensive upgrades, particularly to its electronics system. These enhancements have made it even more useful in modern, cybernetic-orientated warfare dominated by drones and long-distance communication. The US Marine Corps has discontinued use of the M1 for reasons that have nothing to do with the proven effectiveness of the tank, as we'll discover later on. But for now, that leaves the US Army as the only branch of the military making prodigious use of this mean machine. Two of the greatest strengths of the M1 Abrams tank are its cost efficiency and versatility. No other tank manufacturer in the world has managed to create a tank with the same or better specifications across the board that can deliver the same bang for your buck. Although in the case of the M1 Abrams, perhaps it would be more accurate to call it boom for your buck. The M1 is so effective that the US scrapped the Future Combat Systems XM1202 program, which was designed to create a better version of the tank and pair it with similar infantry support vehicles, howitzers, and armored personnel carriers. Instead, the US has opted to use the distinct platforms for the role due to tanks and drones being largely self-sufficient in modern combat. The M1 Abrams has also shown its worth in the Russo-Ukrainian War, squaring up to its Russian counterpart, the T-90. The stats for the T-90, or more precisely, the alarming rate at which the Russians have been losing them, demonstrate the reliability of the US-made tanks by comparison. It could conceivably become a fairer fight in the future, as Russia has actually put into motion designs that should theoretically replace its T-90 main battle tanks with the more formidable T-14 Armata. However, while the initial...
So they're comparing the Russian ones, and they have the T-90, and the T-90 is getting wrecked by the Abrams because, if I'm not mistaken, America sent Abrams to Ukraine for the main purpose of taking out the Russian T-90. And it's not going well for the T-90.
Oh.
But they have this.
Yeah.
T-14 Armata.
platform to manufacture the Armatas was launched in 2010, the tanks have yet to see the light of day nearly 15 years later. To support the US Army troops on the ground, the military also makes extensive use of infantry support vehicles. Two models arguably reign supreme, the M2 Bradley and the M3 Bradley. The US Army has a total of 6,100 units across the different models, some in active duty and some in storage. Dubbed the best vehicle of the Ukraine war, the M2 Bradley and its successor the M3 are both lightly armored, extremely versatile ground support vehicles designed to provide cover fire, optics, and protection for the infantry squads. The Bradleys have two advantages over the contemporary tanks and infantry vehicles of other nations. First, the advanced optics include SADA 2 thermal vision, similar to those used by the M1 Abrams. This allows the Bradley commander to spot the enemy in low visibility situations, and the advanced optics system uses GPS and a laser-guided rangefinder to provide greater accuracy on the battlefield. Then the Bradley's primary weapon, the M242 25mm autocannon, comes into play. With a range of 1.2 miles and 500 RPM, the autocannon can shred through enemy vehicles.
Jesus.
The funny thing is that you have played some kind of video games, so
Yeah.
you actually get some kind of appreciation.
Yeah.
You get 1.93 kilometers.
That's
And you
crazy.
can actually 500 RPM.
Yeah, rounds per minute.
Yes, exactly, honey. Per minute.
No,
That
I know. That's
And this
insane.
is this is the beast, the Bushmaster.
Bushmaster.
Yeah.
Jesus.
including lightly defended tanks, as two Bradleys managed to do against a Russian T-90 in the Ukrainian village of Avdiivka. Since the M242 is balanced firmly on top of the Bradley, the vehicle is capable of accurate fire while moving, allowing the ground troops to advance further through enemy positions. The other infantry support vehicle that the US Army uses is the M1120 Striker range of vehicles, of which the US Army has roughly 4,200 after donating 169 units to Ukraine. The first design was introduced in 2002, making this a relatively modern vehicle with appropriate levels of technology and specifications. In fact, the Striker, an infantry carrier vehicle, has been dubbed the incredibly versatile Striker due to how often the US military has opted to deploy these vehicles on various battlefields. One of the main benefits of the Stryker vehicle design is its ability to seamlessly incorporate new technologies, systems, and weaponry inside its base chassis. This allows the US Army to heavily customize the vehicles based on any situation, giving itself the upper hand in any conflict. The Strykers have been used as reconnaissance vehicles, mobile gun systems, mortar carriers, engineer squad vehicles, mobile command units, medical evaluation support, anti-tank guided missile carriers, and nuclear, biological, and chemical (NBC) warfare support vehicles. This showcases just how broad the range of options for outfitting Strykers to suit.
So the Stryker can do pretty much freaking anything.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, let's say that.
That's yeah.
That
exactly.
it's very versatile, and you can probably just change one thing in it. You can do this with that. And
Yeah,
this with
exactly.
That, and
It depending on what you're going in for.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
can just construct it to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
The mission at hand is. The Rapid Capabilities and Critical Technologies Office, RCCTO, has also suggested that this 8-wheeled vehicle might gain a hybrid version, which would improve its versatility further by making the engine quieter when using electric power and reducing its reliance on refueling. The Stryker's primary defensive system since 2022 is the Directed Energy Maneuver Short-Range Air Defense, or DM-SHORAD anti-air laser system. The 30-kilowatt laser version has been shown to be capable of obliterating a pickup truck's engine block, but Lockheed Martin has equipped Strykers with a 50-kilowatt laser for maximum defensive power. The combination of using Strykers for anti-air defense, the Bradleys for maneuverability, and the M1 Abrams tanks for sheer destructive and offensive potential allows the US Army to effortlessly switch between tactics and dominate the ground.
Wow.
The US Army
So this is the Army. We're going through the Army.
Yeah.
Already now they have
Yeah.
the sheer number of tanks, the sheer number of infantry units, or the mechanics, and this just is incredible. This
Yeah.
is just the Army.
Just one part.
Army
of it.
also
Yeah.
has another stockpile of 4,700 M113 armored personnel carriers, 5,600 MATVs, and over 125,000 high-mobility multi-purpose wheeled vehicles, roughly 40% of which are armored to protect them from mines. This gives the US Army one of the highest numbers of military vehicles across the world, and that's only one of the branches of the military that uses land vehicles. We'll get to some of the others shortly, but first let's take to the skies with the US Air Force. This branch of the US military is arguably the primary factor that has allowed the nation to create such a dominant worldwide military and geopolitical presence. With a total of roughly 690,000 personnel, roughly 320,000 of whom are active duty troops, the US Air Force operates roughly 5,200 aircraft and more than 13,000 pilots. Out of those aircraft, roughly 1,500 are fighter jets, with multi-role F-16Cs making up 789 of the total. The slightly older models, F-15C fighters and F-15E strike craft, number at around 430, and the more modern F-22 air superiority fighters and F-35 strike fighters number at 178 and 116 respectively. With a balanced mix of jets for any occasion, the US Air Force can deploy its pilots across the world and create zones of complete air superiority. And one of the main reasons behind the Air Force's superiority is access to the most modern jet designs. On the Russian side, the Sukhoi Su-57 is less maneuverable than the F-22, and the Russian Air Force doesn't really have a comparable platform to the newer F-35 at all. This is evidenced by the fact that Russia has been vehemently against Ukraine receiving any donations from NATO in the form of the F-16s, which would endanger Russia's efforts to achieve air superiority, not just within Ukraine, but within its own borders too. The F-35 was designed to be one of the most versatile fighter jets ever built, with several possible configurations of weapons and missile loads for different missions. The stealth design utilizes 4 air-to-ground smart bombs, or air-to-air missiles, while the Beast mode loads the aircraft up with up to 16 missiles for maximum offensive power.
Holy.
The F-35
So I really love the fact that they call it, what are we going to call it when it's like fully stocked with all the weapons? Let's call it Beast mode.
Oh,
It just
beast
gives me
mode.
goosebumps.
Yeah,
Let's call it Beast mode.
time
Like,
for
why not?
beast
Why not?
mode. I can see it in the
55
movie.
is also-
It's time for the beast mode.
Yeah. You're going Beast mode. Oh, hell yeah.
notable for being able to display vital battlefield data in real time, while simultaneously transmitting this data to other jets and military platforms in the vicinity. This allows a jet to act as a highly mobile airborne recon unit and enhance the performance of the US Air Force, Marines, or Army. The F-35's success on the battlefield has led to an overall increase in production, which brought its cost per unit down to below that of the F-22. This has allowed the Air Force to replenish its stockpile on a lower budget and enable the US to export the fighter jet to other countries, primarily its NATO allies. European jet fighter projects don't have a ready equivalent to the F-35, with the Eurofighter Typhoon comparable to the F-22 in terms of stealth technology, but pricier to obtain. This is why the Air Force has ordered another 1,763 F-35As to join its fleet in the coming years, mainly to replace the increasingly obsolete F-15s and 16s. What makes the US Air Force, and to an extent the Marine Corps, so successful and noteworthy is their vast array of transport aircraft. With 213 helicopters and 677 transport jets, the US Air Force can mount an air presence and deliver American troops to far-off corners of the Earth with minimal effort. When combined with the other branches of the US military, the US has roughly 5,700 helicopters at its disposal, the biggest helicopter arsenal in the world. By comparison, Russia, in second place, only has 1,547 helicopters. This indicates the massive tactical and strategic gap between the countries when it comes to aerial infantry support. The third major component of the US military is its Navy. Actually, the Navy is the second largest branch in terms of manpower. At nearly 335,000 active military personnel, the figure is slightly above the Air Force's numbers. One of the hallmarks of the US Navy is its ability to operate in pretty much any ocean in the world and project force onto littoral or near coastal regions regardless of where they might be. The US Navy's ships have long-term assignments in both the Indian and Pacific Oceans, allowing them to create pressure on the Chinese, who are considered by many to be its biggest military and geopolitical rival. This is done by means of the largest navy in the world by tonnage, which boasts 11 aircraft carriers, 9 helicopter carriers, 75 destroyers, 23 corvettes, and 64 submarines. To put things into perspective, the Chinese Navy has only 2 aircraft carriers at present. Russia has 1, and the only other nations with any aircraft carriers at all are either members of NATO or India, which is a signatory to the Quad Alliance alongside the US. Even then, the maximum number that any of these nations have is just 2. In fact, the US has more carriers than the rest of the world combined. For the second naval category, destroyer-type ships, the next highest ranked is China with just 49 destroyers, while Japan, another Quad signatory, comes in third with 36. The Navy's aircraft carriers are classed into Nimitz and Gerald R. Ford-type ships, with 10 Nimitz-class carriers and 1 Ford-class carrier in active use. The Ford-class carriers are the newest designs, with 2 such more carriers under construction and an additional one on order. The Ford class.
I think a video you and I have to watch is actually to see one of the Gerald Ford class carrier, because you
Like one of these.
yeah, the big freaking ships. I mean, they call it cities on oceans.
Ah,
So
okay.
that's a
Yeah.
good thing. Maybe we can take a look at
Yeah.
one of those. Gerald Ford is the newest one, I think.
Oh, okay.
I think.
Class is widely considered the best aircraft carrier in the world. One of its pioneering innovations is the EMALS, short for Electromagnetic Aircraft Launch System, which is faster, more accurate, and smoother than the traditional Nimitz-class steam catapults. According to the Navy's estimates, the new system should increase sortie generation, or the number of flights that can be conducted from the carrier per day, by 33%. Combined with multi-role fighter jets acting as veritable recon units, the Navy and Air Force can team up to generate vital information, transmit it to other troops, and take down vital targets from far away. No other nation comes close in this regard. The newest Chinese aircraft carrier designs have attempted to emulate EMALS with mixed success. The arrested landing system, in turn, allows the carrier to minimize runway size and reduce the impact of landing aircraft on the ship's hull and deck. The Ford's Advanced Arresting Gear, or AAG, is designed to be more resistant to wear and tear and have lower maintenance requirements. Together with not 1 but 2 nuclear reactors powering the carrier, this feature allows the carrier to stay at sea practically indefinitely, so long as it's supplied with enough consumables. This is further helped by advancements in operating technology.
So they don't have to go back and fuel.
That's-
There's nuclear power. It can be there forever. There's no need. They can just go forever. Indefinite. Like he said, only the need is like stuff to survive, like food and stuff like that. Water. That's basically it.
Wow.
Technology that have reduced crew requirements by up to 20% compared to the Nimitz. But despite the reduced crew size, the carrier is physically bigger than the Nimitz, which allows it to carry far more payload and host a multitude of quality of life enhancements for the working crew and stationed pilots. Considering that warfare in recent years has highlighted the effectiveness of long-range missiles and drones, the fact that the US Navy is building not 1 but 3 more carriers at present shows that the US Navy has the utmost confidence in the Ford's ability to project force, outcompete foreign carriers, and provide vital.
That's a good picture. That's
Wow.
yeah. I think when I first saw one of the videos, you cannot appreciate the size of it until you get this picture like you see here now. You cannot even imagine. It feels like it's a photoshopped picture, but it's so huge. So I think we should watch.
I think so. Yeah.
Vital sea and air support to other branches of the US military. But for all that power, the US Navy and Air Force can't project as directly as the Marine Corps can. With a combination of infantry, Navy, aerial, and expeditionary forces, the Marines are designed to be the primary sea-to-land littoral combat units and special forces of the US military. To that effect, the Marine Corps currently have roughly 180,000 active personnel, alongside one of the most versatile equipment arsenals available to any branch of the military. However, what makes the Marines truly dangerous is not what they currently are, but what they are evolving into. Historically, the Marines have been used as naval-based support infantry and special forces. However, with China arguably being the US's biggest military and economic competitor, the bulk of the Marine Corps is being updated to match modern military standards and tactics. In particular, the Force Design Plan is intended to heavily cut Marine Corps expenditure and transport costs. One of the main ways this is being done is by discontinuing the use of M1 Abrams tanks as one of the Corps' main armor vehicles, as mentioned earlier. Additionally, the Marines are no longer designed to take an active part in warfare. Instead, Marine Corps operations will be more catered toward littoral combat and area denial. In particular, the Marines are being outfitted with Mobile Long-Range Precision Strike Missile Systems, MLRPSM for short. This notion is exemplified by Marine Corps General Eric Smith's statement that if the Marines can sink one of your $1.5 billion ships with a $1.5 million missile, the Marines are a threat, and that may change the calculus. As such, the Marines are perhaps one of the few sectors of the US military where the focus is on streamlining and trimming the fat, so to speak. The Force Design Initiative should free up as much as $12 billion in Marine Corps funding to be allocated to other branches of the military. However, the Marines still have plenty of firepower to go around, evidenced by the fact that they are moving away from traditional HIMARS systems to the new Navy and Marine Corps Expeditionary Ship Interdiction System, or Nemesis. The Nemesis is designed to hit sea targets from the land. The way it will be ideally implemented in the Marine Corps is to have the Marines set up mobile bases on islands or military bases close to enemy Navy positions. In the case of China, this would likely be the islands in the South China Sea. This strategy would allow the Marines to effectively prevent China from utilizing its Navy, while allowing the US Navy to progress further into Chinese waters. With the Marines being effectively transformed into an anti-China unit, there's only one more frontier that warrants a mention, and it's one that few have gone to before. The US military officially set its sights on space by establishing the US Space Force in late 2019. This newest branch of the military is not designed to fight aliens, at least not yet, but to protect the US satellites orbiting Earth. The US currently operates about 250 military satellites, roughly half of all military satellites in orbit. These satellites are primarily designed to provide vital recon and pass the information gleaned to the other branches of the military. Therefore, the establishment of the first Space Force in the world showcases the US military's commitment to staying above other armies, in this case quite literally, in terms of providing the military with a global outreach. The Space Force is the smallest branch of the military, with only 8,941 active service members and 16,000 total personnel. One of the forces.
I like how he says it's only 8,000. There's only 8,000.
18.
What?
Wasn't it 18,000?
Okay.
Huh.
The global outreach. The Space Force is the smallest branch of the military, with only 8,941 active service members and 16,000 total personnel. One of the force's key assets is the unmanned Boeing X-37B spaceplane. It's a plane that launches vertically with the help of a rocket, like a space shuttle, delivers a payload into Earth's orbit, then cruises back to Earth and lands on a runway. The X-37B is too small to be a weapon-bearing plane, but it's most likely going to be effective at tuning both existing and future satellites to more advanced stealth technology and upgrading the Space Force's protocols to ensure the US military is ready for newcomers to the space race. Speaking of the newest branch of the US military, how is it that it's growing at such a rate in the first place? Well, it isn't really. In fact, the US military has been shrinking for decades, and a big part of the reason is a lack of new recruits. The number of new recruits who go through boot camp has dropped by nearly 40% since 1987. In recent years, the US military has actually failed to achieve its recruitment targets, missing them by as much as 10,000 to 15,000 recruits per year, or roughly 20% of the total number of recruits. This trend is similar in most Western countries. One of the main reasons why this might be worrying for the US military is that the country doesn't have mandatory military service. While the US Congress can technically announce a draft, there hasn't been one since 1973, over 50 years ago. That means there's an entire generation or two of people who never experienced mandatory military service. Even worse, the willingness of young people to serve in the military seems to be at an all-time low. According to polls conducted by the Pentagon, less than 10% of people between 16 and 21 years of age expressed an interest in serving. Today, nearly 80% of new recruits come from families of military officers and service members, so the US military has effectively become a family business. But does this mean the US military is on the decline? Probably not. Despite the difficulties in achieving recruitment targets, the US military still remains by far the most advanced military in the world and is taking steps to convert the issue into an advantage. Vital branches of the force like the Marines have already started to plan for downsizing, new carriers have lowered crew requirements, and unmanned drone warfare is changing the way modern military conflicts are fought. These developments indicate that the US military plans to rely more on technology than people to power its offensive and defensive forces in the future. And in an era where the US is allied with most of the top 10 militaries in the world through NATO or the Quad, the US military doesn't need to maintain a full monopoly on military power to the same extent as before. It merely has to keep its allies close and enemies like China and Russia firmly behind the technological curve, as it's been doing successfully for decades. But what do you think? What do you predict will happen to the US military in the coming decades? Thank you for watching, and please leave your comments below.
Okay.
Interesting.
Well, declining. I think it's all about the world we live in today. They don't see the same thing that people did before, how important it is to have. I think it's a culture thing nowadays. I think the culture in the Western world has changed significantly when it comes to being that individual for country, for freedom, for stuff like that. I think that has been declining. Sweden have, I think we're back to forcing people into service again. I don't know if they started yet, but there was a talk about getting to start the draft again because no one wanted to do military service. So it's a very difficult question that two Swedes can't answer.
Absolutely not.
I highly enjoyed this video on so many levels.
Wow, it's so much bigger, and not just bigger, just huge. Overwhelming, thank you.
Yeah, overwhelming feeling.
It's insane.
Yeah. As I always say, thank God these guys are the good guys.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Thank you. Thank you. A big thank you to everyone who support us on Patreon and of course on channel membership on YouTube. No matter what tier, you guys rock. Thank you so much. A big thank you goes is the same to the PayPalers, the GoFundMeers, the Super Thankers, and of course the most important thing, the amazing community that we have. You can see that in the comment section. Please keep on being positive, engaging, and lovable. Thank you. And that will be the end of it. I'm Recky.
And I'm Carol.
You
stay safe.